get started. So just letting you know, this is the 5th webinar in the Woodland Stewards Silvopasture webinar series. The next one is March 5th, Tuesday, March 5th, where we're kind of wrap up and we're going to bring back all the producers who have shared their stories so they can answer your questions. If you want to stay up to date on future Woodland Stewards webinar series, you can click on this link to be added to the list. I will put this in the chat. Again, it's already in the chat a little bit. You'll find it there. We will add the slides from today's presentation to the link where you first joined the webinar series, or sorry, the webinar. It's kind of buried at the bottom, so you just have to look for it there, but it will be there by the end of this webinar. And like I said, you can find all the other webinars from previous year's series by going to the webinar portal and finding the Woodland Stewards webinar series, including a really great series on timber taxes, which is relevant for anyone who owns any kind of land, timberland, farmland, etc. If you would like to fill out the evaluation about this webinar, which we always welcome, and or receive a certificate or continuing education units, you're going to go back to this screen where the webinar first launched from, and click complete webinar, and that will take you to get your continuing education units and or fill out an evaluation. And lastly, this Woodland Stewards webinar series program, which is in its 6th season, was created by a team of extension professionals from many different programs, including North Carolina State Extension, Clemson, University of Tennessee, University of Georgia, University of Kentucky, Mississippi State, University of Maryland, University of Florida, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Missouri, University of Missouri Extension, and more. So it's been a real group effort. And lastly, we are not going to have too much time for questions at the end. We will, because we have 3 speakers today, and we'll do as many as we can. However, please use the Q&A function to add your question. It makes it easier. And we'll do our best to get to all of them. And I think that's it. So I'm going to hand it over to our first presenter, Joe Alley, and I'll let him introduce himself and share his slides.
Okay. Thank you, Leslie. Can you hear me okay?
I can. You're coming through clear.
Okay, great. Thanks, Leslie, for having me here, and thanks everybody for joining us here today. Again, my name is Joe Alley, and I'm the National Agroforester with the Natural Resource Conservation Service, which basically means I'm the technical lead for agroforestry within the agency. A little bit of background about myself. I grew up on a farm in eastern Kansas. Grew up during the farm crisis of the 80s and was encouraged to seek my fortunes elsewhere. And so I instead went into the lucrative career of Midwestern forestry. That's a little bit of a joke there. Got my bachelor's and master's from the University of Missouri, both in forestry with an emphasis in agroforestry on that master's degree. Career-wise, spent some time as basically a technician in the University of Missouri Center for Agroforestry. Spent some time in the forest industry on the pine seedling nursery side of things. Spent a little time as a state agency forester. But I've spent the last over 21 years now with the Natural Resource Conservation Service as a forester. I was the state forester in Missouri for the last 5 years until taking this role as National Agroforester just last year. So enough about me. Let's get on in here. I'm going to go ahead and turn off video to save on bandwidth a little bit. And I probably need to be sharing a screen too. So let's make sure we get that going.
Great. I'll confirm for you if it's once we see it.
Okay. Should have done that already. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's shown up clearly, so all good.
All right, great. Okay, so there's the intro slide that I should add up there. We'll move ahead. So quick overview, just 4 things I want to cover, but I'm going to be throwing a lot of information in here. So like Leslie said, the slides will be available to you, and you can follow up to me with questions if you have them. I'll do a quick overview of what is NRCS. I feel like that's pretty important to know, and talk about our planning process and natural resource concerns. And then we'll get into what I think most of you are probably here for at least for my part, is talking about our programs, which is how you can get some assistance in installing Silvopasture on your farm. And then touch on a few additional resources and tools. So NRCS was born out of the Dust Bowl, excuse me, back in the 1930s. We started as the Soil Erosion Service in 1933, but then became the Soil Conservation Service in 1935 with our chief, Hugh Hammond Bennett, the guy right up there in the upper right-hand corner of the slide. And he was a true visionary and a great leader for our agency at that time. Over time, we, of course, started kind of branching out and working in more areas, touching more natural resources, if you want to think about it that way. And in the 1990s, as a result of this kind of expansion of duties, we changed our name to the Natural Resources Conservation Service. We are located within the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So there's several agencies that fit within U.S. Department of Agriculture, and we are one of them. What I'm showing here is the link to our homepage, the NRCS homepage. And probably, again, one of the most important things I want you to take home is this section right here. If you scroll down on this homepage, you'll find this: find your local service center, enter your state, enter your county, and it'll provide the contact information for the folks that you need to reach out to, so that you can talk with them about what's going on your farm and get some assistance. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about a little bit is what we do, what our agency does, and that's conservation planning. And part of the reason I'm sharing this with you is, again, if you haven't worked with NRCS, there's, like any other group organization, we have our own lingo, and kind of understanding how this is going on in the background with our employees, our planners, will be helpful to you to as you're working with us. The key thing that our agency is built on is conservation planning. And a conservation plan is something that our NRCS staff will work with you as a landowner to develop these plans. And the ultimate goal of that plan is to probably provide some technical assistance and hopefully some financial assistance also to do what you're wanting to do on your farm. It's important to note that these plans are voluntary, and again, input from the landowner is critical to make them work. They're site specific to your farm. They're action oriented. We don't want a plan just to sit on the counter. We want you to use it, and they have a focus on what we call natural resource concerns. And so what are those? NRCS recognizes 6 categories of natural resources. That's soil, water, air, plants, animals, and energy. Within each one of these categories, we then break those down into subgroups, I guess you might say, or resource concerns is what we call them. And sometimes they break down even farther into resource concern components. But long story short, there's currently a total of 47 of these. And you don't need to worry about that. That's getting pretty deep in the weeds. I just want to share a little bit of the detail about what's going on in the background. So to kind of think about this in a practical sense, I've got a couple of images here. On the left, we've got an eroding crop field. On the right, we have some cows loafing under a tree. So thinking about this, again, from the NRCS perspective, and what are the natural resource concerns going on here. On the left, we have what we call sheet and rail erosion. So we have water leaving the site, it's eroding soil, it's taking soil to probably down to surface water somewhere, so it's polluting from that standpoint. It's probably carrying possibly some nutrients, pesticides offsite. And there's also some soil health issues going on here as well. Organic matter, aggregate stability, all those good things. On the right, something many of you are probably familiar with. I hope you're not, but you probably are. We have some cows that obviously like to hang out in the shade a little bit. So the resource concern we would see here is basically a lack of shade. Livestock shelter would be the term we would use. There might be an issue with feed and forage balance. The tree itself is suffering from having the cows in it all the time, so that's a plant productivity and health concern right there. So just again, kind of giving you an idea. No two places are the same, but that's again kind of gives you a little bit of idea of how we would look at these things. So to handle these resource concerns, we have these things called conservation practice standards. We have several pillars that our agency is kind of built around or structured on, and the conservation practice standards are a very important part of that. We have over 160 national conservation practice standards. Not every state is going to have all of those. I just want to make that pretty clear. States have the options of selecting which practice standards are suited to their conditions. States also have the flexibility to make some adjustments to the standard. There's some things they can't change, but there are other things that they can change to again make that standard fit their situation a little bit better. So what I'm showing here is the first page of the Silvopasture Conservation Practice Standard, and they are all these standards are structured the same. They have a title, they have a code number. The code for silvopasture is 381. They have a unit of measure, acres, definition, purposes, conditions where the practice applies. Then we get into something called criteria, which are things that when the practice is applied, these are things that must be followed. And we also have, not shown here, often have additional criteria which are tied to these some individual purposes. So if you're trying to address erosion, for example, there would be some specific things that you would have to meet to address erosion. And there's also some things called considerations, which are more generalities and just things for folks to be aware of and possibly plan for as well. So before we get into talking about programs, which is my next slide, I just want to kind of sum things up here a little bit and talk about silvopasture within the NRCS context. And this could really go for any practice, but we're talking about silvopasture here today. I want to thank my colleague, Kate McFarland from the National Agroforestry Center for sharing this visual aid with me. I think it does a good job of kind of explaining what I'm trying to get across here. I think everyone in this room, this virtual room, might have kind of their own idea of what silvopasture is, and that's okay. There are a lot of definitions out there from landowner to landowner, amongst academics, partner organization, non-governmental organizations. And again, so that's kind of the broader perspective of what silvopasture is and what it can do and how you can do it and everything else. Then as we kind of drill down and tighten up and talk about silvopasture within NRCS, we have these standards. And so that's the sideboards that we have to work with. So that's that second inner circle there. And that's at the national level. So again, the states can make those standards more restrictive if they choose to. And so that's what the third smaller circle is. And then sometimes, either at the national or state level, there may be aspects of our programs that might also put in additional sideboards on how that practice can be implemented and provided financial assistance. This is kind of a big jump from just talking about the technical aspect out here in a standard to what we can provide financial assistance for. And again, I don't want to get any more in the weeds on that, but I just wanted to kind of provide some awareness. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about programs a bit. And I'm going to be open here and say I'm speaking out of generalities because I'm at the national level. I can't provide specifics to you for your individual state because I don't work there. There's, again, things may vary from state to state and how those programs are delivered. And just another note, I think everyone's aware the Inflation Reduction Act has pushed a lot of money out there to implement agroforestry practices, including silvopasture. So that's going to possibly have some impact on how things are done as well. So going back to our national website, there's this banner across the top with these different buttons. If you click on the programs and initiatives buttons, you'll get this screen that I'm showing here. And you can scroll down this page. There's many more programs and initiatives as you go down the page, but I've got the main ones that I want to talk about circled here. EQIP, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, and the Conservation Stewardship Program, or CSP. I noticed also that they have the Conservation Reserve Program on this website. This program is actually administered by the Farm Service Agency, or FSA. I'll talk about that again here briefly. So I just want to make you aware that it is not our program. We provide technical guidance on that program, but we don't administer that program. So let's talk about EQIP and CSP for a few minutes. There are some things that are common to these two programs, so let's get those out of the way first. There's a continuous sign up for these programs, so you can walk into any of our offices or online and sign up for these programs at any time. But they're generally state identified cutoff periods for applying for a specific ranking batch. Let's say that we're only going to have one funding period for fiscal year 24, and it's going to have a cutoff date of whatever, let's say November 12th. So if you don't apply, if you apply after that date, then you miss that, and you're going to have to wait until the next one comes around. So that's something that you want to definitely be communicating with your field office staff about, is to know when these dates are. Applicant and land eligibility, I'm just throwing those words out there so you're familiar that these are some things you're going to have to discuss, but we can't get into those details either. The programs are competitive. This is simply because there's a limited amount of funding to go around. And these are indeed contracts that you're going to be entering into. So what you agree to within these programs is you are required to complete these items. All right, EQIP first, we'll talk about that. This program is really works well with how our agency was developed. This program is designed to address individual resource concerns on your farm. The contract period is variable, can be 2 to 3 years, maybe out to 5 years. It can go longer if necessary, but generally shorter is better. The payments are flat rate payments, and these are determined through some averaging that our agency does annually, but just want to make you aware that you will know what you're going to get paid as this contract is being developed, and you'll know before you sign on the dotted line what we're going to pay you. It doesn't matter what the real cost is. We're paying this flat rate amount. And also, it's important to understand that the payments are made after the practice is installed and certified. There are some situations where advance payments are an option, but again, I don't want to get into the weeds too far. So just to kind of show you an example, this is a farm in Missouri. Show you kind of the big picture over here on the left, and then we're zooming in on the right. I figure if we can see it with the Google Maps, the trees are probably doing okay. And this individual used tree and shrub site preparation, tree and shrub establishment, which includes the purchase of the trees, mulching, and pasture and hayland planting to establish this practice. They use the pasture and hayland planting because this was previously cropland. Don't have a lot of good on the ground pictures from this particular operation, but this gives you an idea. He's a sheep farmer, and you can vaguely see he's got cages around his trees back here in the background. A few other examples I'd like to share with you. This is Hawaii. These are koa trees. And on the right, you can see a pretty good detail of the cage that they've got around these trees. Looks like 5 T-posts and a panel wrapped around them. So pretty substantial. These are a new planting in Illinois. And I wish I could talk to you guys for another 30 minutes about this producer. This guy is down in Southwest Missouri, doing some really interesting things. Really don't have time to get into it, like I said, but honestly, we did very little with him. He'd already established most of these larger trees, these honey locusts, which he's included in here for the pod production. He's also doing some browsing on some shrub species that he installed on his own. So happy to discuss this more with you. And he set these rows up 90 feet apart to provide some management options, basically. There's another close-up. Over here in the upper left, you see the calf walking along with the fence in the foreground. He used basically just a little wrap of wire looped off of the main hot wire to provide protection to the tree. That, again, wasn't anything we paid for because it didn't meet our specs, but it worked well for him. And as long as it effectively protected the tree, we were okay with it working for him. This might be something you're a little bit more familiar with. This is some silvopasture down in Georgia. All right, sorry, I'm gonna move out of the pictures and back into the words again. Let's talk about the Conservation Stewardship Program. This program is very different than EQIP. It's really designed for producers that are already doing good things, already chinning the bar, as they say. And with this program, we encourage them to take it a step further to increase their level of conservation. One of the many unique things about this program is you have to include all of your acres for each land use. So ag land is a land use. So if you have crop, you have pasture, that's all one land use. Stewardship threshold is another thing. Basically, you have to, again, kind of be at a fairly high level of addressing resource concerns to get in. And it's a 5-year contract, so it doesn't matter. It's not like EQIP, it's not flexible. It's a 5-year contract. And there is an annual base payment that's based on the number of resource concerns that you're addressing at the beginning and what you will be addressing at the end of the contract. So again, there's lots of details going on into this program. Those base payments can be fairly good. So this program is good for landowners. I'll just stop there with that. To take them, when I say take things to the next level, usually we're going to be using these things called enhancements. Enhancements are based on our conservation practice standards. And again, like our practices with equip, you're going to get paid for these after installation and certification. And also, you're going to know upfront what those payments are going to be. It's just another flat rate, but they are substantially higher than what the equip practices are. Just sharing a few links here to find out more information about enhancements. First one is fact sheets, and that's what I'm showing over here on the left. So whatever thing you're interested in, you can dig in and read a whole lot more. Then if you want to see the entire crazy enhancement list, you can click on that second link. And when I say crazy, I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, there's a lot out there, and you need to definitely work with your NRCS folks to really understand what these mean. But as an example, what I've got listed here on the right are all of the enhancements that have to do with prescribed grazing. So each one of these takes it a step further, basically. And that's just for prescribed grazing, that one practice. We have one silvopasture enhancement, and it is essentially designed to develop or maintain silvopasture with while improving wildlife habitat. So kind of go back to that farm that I showed you earlier. With equip, we plan that down at the field level, and we're addressing individual resource concerns at the field level. Over here on CSP, this entire farm is going to be in that CSP contract, even if we're still just doing some work here in the same area. I think I'm kind of running out of time, so I'm going to go through these last few things rather quickly. We have technical service providers who are private individuals who can assist landowners in developing planning practices, planning activities, and also in designing practices. These are typically contracted through an equip contract. So the landowner gets a contract to develop a planning activity or design activity. They go out and select and hire a TSP to develop that item, and that's how it works. I've got a couple links here to give you a little bit more information. The first link is just the general website, lots of information there. And the second one is for finding a TSP. Other programs, RCPP, I think I'm going to skip that one. It's, again, a little bit of a mouthful. I do want to spend a few minutes talking about CRP, the Conservation Reserve Program. Again, this program is administered by the Farm Service Agency, and I know lots of you are probably familiar with CRP. Provides an annual payment for establishing and maintaining some type of conservation cover. In our case, that might often be trees. But there are limits on what you can do with that grant because it's basically taken out of production. But you can often, when the contract ends, particularly with a tree planting practice, you might be set up to move right into a active silvopasture practice. Okay, I want to touch on this really quickly. This is the Partnership for Climate Smart Commodities. And I cannot provide much detail about this because it is not an NRCS program, and it's instead a higher level USDA program. However, I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't make you aware of this because there are some opportunities here for silvopasture, particularly for planting trees rather than thinning trees. This funding for this program has been pushed out directly to partners. So this is already over and done with as far as that part. These partners are now working with landowners to implement these projects. And so to give you an idea of kind of how you might find out more, I provided a link here to get you to this website. This is the dashboard, and you'll notice there's several drop-down menus. Easiest way to do this is to select your state, enter your practice down here, select your practice, there's the drop-down, and then it'll give you a list over here of the partners that are working in your state, and you can select those individual partners and see what their project is all about. I'm not saying that every one of them is going to have the perfect silvopasture option for you, but it might be worth looking at as another source of assistance. And just to give you an idea, again, I picked Florida only because it was the only one I could get all of the information onto one screenshot. Selected Florida silvopasture, and I have these three here. Last thing I want to do, I want to mention the National Agroforestry Center. Click on this link. This is run by the U.S. Forest Service. I'm housed here at the National Agroforestry Center in Lincoln, Nebraska. These folks are the go-to for everything agroforestry, and I encourage you to check out their website and reach out when you get a chance. And I'm just going to cycle on through and stop it right there. And Leslie, you might be easier to cancel me more quickly than I can get to it. Thanks.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Joe. And I will be sharing all these slides, and we will also be creating a document with all the links from any of our presenters for any resources at all as we kind of complete the series. So those will be coming. But I will go ahead and hand it over to you, JB, and let you can go ahead and continue. Thanks so much.
Excellent. Thank you, Leslie. I'm JB Daniel. I'm the State Grazing Specialist and Grassland Agronomist here in Virginia, representing USDA and the Natural Resources Conservation Service. I've served in this capacity for the last 15 years and glad to be invited to speak on some of this today. I'm going to go ahead and turn my video off. And can you see the slides, Leslie?
Yep, they're coming in nice and clear.
Okay. I was asked to speak on a few things. One was more educational opportunities to learn more about silvopasture if you're a landowner, or even if you're a natural resource professional wanting to direct landowners in your area where to go. In Virginia, Virginia Tech and Virginia Cooperative Extension, they've taken the lead on the education aspect of this. They set up this great web page, and taken some screenshots and put here on this slide. And it links you from this landing page to other websites. There's Silvopasture team of ag professionals who are involved in this, different presentations that they've recorded and are available for landowners to watch and learn from, other publications that explain different aspects of transitioning to silvopasture, and also some videos that were very well done, highlighting different types of silvopasture establishment and management. And I put the link there at the bottom of this slide, but it's also on the last slide in this set. But a lot of good resources there if you're wanting to learn more about silvopasture in your state. Also here in Virginia specifically, back, it's been over 10 years ago when we got started with this practice in NRCS, and we did not have any well-established silvopasture sites to carry landowners to view and see so that they could really understand visually what we were talking about as far as managing silvopasture. So we had a state conservation innovation grant project with Virginia Tech, and they established, it's about, I'm going to say 40 acres of silvopasture in 8 different treatments at the Southern Piedmont Ag Research and Extension Center in Blackstone, Virginia. And they established that, I want to say in 2015, 2016. And since then it's been managed. They have different treatments. Some was converting from standing pine forest to silvopasture, and you can see what that looks like on the left side of the screen there. And other treatments were, it was clear cut and then prepped and planted the forage, and also loblolly pines were planted. You can see that on the right, providing an alleyway of this is I think a 40-foot alleyway in between 2 rows of pines, and that's just repeated across the field. So basically, this is set up as a demonstration project for farmers, landowners, and other interested parties to come learn. They see this at field days, or we also do some ag professional training at this site. That's really good. We also have some well-established silvopasture sites on farms throughout Virginia. And this just highlights one of them, Miller Adams down in Red Oak, Virginia. I worked with him, and he established, or he converted some standing loblolly pine into silvopasture, clear cutting alleys and thinning the remaining pines, as you see there on the left side of that aerial view, and then establishing switchgrass as the forage base in that silvopasture system. And you can see that this picture was taken, I guess, about a year after the switchgrass had been planted. This is in the second season that it came out growing very well. So that's what that looks like. We've got several sites around the state where landowners have successfully converted and established silvopasture using primarily using EQIP, or as Joe explained. And most of these landowners are very open and welcome to host somebody who wants to make a visit and learn more and just see it for themselves. And we can connect people with these successful producers. As far as technical assistance at the state and local level, it really starts within your individual state, going to your USDA field office or the service center in your locality where your district conservationists and your soil conservationists are located and work from. If you go to them, some of you may already be working with them, but other producers may be new to agriculture, and you want to invite your local district conservationists out just for a farm visit. You want to give them a tour of your operation. You want to show them exactly what you're doing, and then explain to them what your goals and objectives are into the future as far as establishing silvopasture and what you understand about that. And then what they'll do as part of the technical assistance they provide through our planning process, they'll basically do a thorough evaluation of your resources there on the farm, the soil, water, air, plants, animals, and so forth. And in the context of your specific grazing system and with your goals in mind, they'll develop a conservation plan for you. And that a conservation plan will outline the resource concerns or areas that you can improve upon. And they'll try to incorporate, obviously, the silvopasture practice, if that's what you're interested in. That will be put in your conservation plan, along with other practices to make it function properly, and other practices that may address other resource concerns, whether it be soil erosion and so forth and so on. And they'll go over that with you. But in this process, when they're actually planning or helping you design your paddocks that you're going to put silvopasture in, they'll look at tree species selection, spacing of those trees, and the layout or the orientation of the rows or the grass alleys and so forth, depending on what you're starting from and what you're transitioning to as far as your specific silvopasture. They'll involve the local forester to make sure the trees that you're thinking of or your desire are adapted to that region of Virginia or your specific state. And they'll go over the proper way to plant those trees and or shrubs that you're going to include in there. And then they'll put together a formal design on something used to call a job sheet. And that's just more of a map view layout of how you're going to plant it. And it's just a summary of prepping the site, establishing the trees and or establishing the forage within those trees, and then and managing that afterwards. And once you get that planned and implemented, then here in Virginia, it's a requirement if you're going to establish silvopasture using our Farm Bill programs, then you have to commit to managing those grazing animals on it. And we call that practice prescribed grazing. So they'll develop a grazing plan for you based on the size of your herd, number of grazing acres, and they'll write in some specific management guidelines as it relates to managing these livestock in the silvopasture paddocks or acres that you will establish. And During the planning process, here in Virginia at least, our local district conservationists will consult with me. I'll review the proposed plan. In certain cases, I'll make a site visit out to the site if I need to consult with the landowner. But ultimately, I've got to sign off on the plans before it's approved for an official project. And that's just here in Virginia at the present time. They'll do a formal update to that conservation plan. You'll approve it. And then the next step is where you would go and apply for financial assistance to help you implement the plan. And in each state, as Joe talked about, there's different payment schedules for all the practices. And basically, you can go to this page, and I've got a link at the end slide of my presentation, where you can type in and go to payment schedules and rates by state. You can scroll down. I've just taken a screenshot of Virginia's here, and this highlights PDF documents that you can open up on each of the individual programs, the EQIP program, the payment schedules and the rates for each practice, CST program, and so forth and so on. And here at the bottom is a summary of all Virginia payment schedule scenarios. It gets a deeper dive into more of the details, but this is accessible publicly on the website, and you can search your payment schedule rates, because each states are somewhat different, because these payment schedules and the rates or the costs associated with it are done regionally. And this is a map of the different regions of how they're developed. Of course, Virginia falls in what we call the Appalachian region, but you see the different regions across the U.S. And that's just understandable, because, you know, the cost associated with establishing silvopasture is going to be different in California than it will be in Virginia, and so on and so forth. So you got to figure out which one you're in, and they have the set rates and schedules accordingly for your area. So you can drill down on this website that I've linked to, and you can look at the silvopasture practice scenarios and the rates per acre here in Virginia, at least for fiscal year 24, of what they're paying per acre. And there's some significant differences, and those differences are based on what you're starting from and what you're transitioning to. But there's, I don't know, there might be 15 different payment schedule scenarios this year available for silvopasture. And you can look into that in your specific state on that website to give you more detailed information relative to you. There are other partner organizations throughout the state, or throughout the nation rather, but one of the main partner organizations that's focusing a lot on agroforestry practices, which includes silvopasture, is Appalachian Sustainable Development, and ASD. They organize and provide training on silvopasture and other agroforestry practices. I've partnered with them this year to do a training on silvopasture in 2023. And they were very organized, just very professional, did a great job hosting that training. We did it in Blackstone, and they did other agroforestry trainings for ag professionals as well throughout the state. And they're really good. They have a really good website linking you to other resources and information on all these different agroforestry practices. And they summarize and link you to different funding opportunities to help fund the implementation of silvopasture as well as these other practices. So that's just one example of a pretty significant, well-established partner organization that is doing a lot of good technical assistance, as well as leading you to financial assistance opportunities. And this one, like I said, is based here in Virginia and the Mid-Atlantic region, but I'm sure there's many others across the U.S. in your specific region, wherever you're tuning in from, likewise. Here's just my final slide, which is a summary slide, just with some links. This should be available after this session, where you can look at this and you can find your local service center. You can link to the practice scenarios, payment rates. You can go to the Virginia Cooperative Extension Silvopasture page, look at those resources. And you can see also what the Appalachian Sustainable Development Organization has on its website and how that might relate to you. So Leslie, that concludes my slides, and we can go ahead and transition to the next speaker.
Great. Thanks so much, JB. We're going to switch gears over to Buck Holsinger, and I'll let him introduce himself. I did put the links from JB's final slide in the chat box as well. And like I said, the slides from all the today's presentations are already up on the link where you join the webinar. And we will share like a comprehensive resource with all the resources listed throughout the series as we kind of wrap up as well. So I know it's hard when you have all these things in 25 different places. So I'll hand it over to you, Buck, and your screen is nice and clear. Thanks.
Awesome. Good day to you, wherever you are in the world. My name is Buck Holsinger. I'm a landowner producer in Virginia. Worked extensively with JB to establish this silvopasture that I get the, I'm humbled and thrilled to be able to share with you all today. Just a little bit about myself. I'm a part-time farmer. I'm a full-time pilot. I fly for Southwest Airlines, as well as I'm a member of the West Virginia Air National Guard. So a lot of the things that we do on the farm specifically are done part-time. And while it is our passion, it is a team effort for the entire family. Holsinger Home Place Farms is circa 1773. My kids are the 10th generation on what, if you had asked me 10 years ago, was a grass-fed beef operation. If you had asked me 7 years ago, I would have said that it was a rotational grazing operation that utilized grass-fed beef. And if you ask my wife and I now, we are a full-blown silvopasture project. And we've really enjoyed seeing the benefits, not only to our family and to our cattle, hogs, chickens, but also to the wildlife. And we started with hopefully we'll be able to turn this into a laser pointer. It started with a continuously grazed 72-acre pasture. When I farmed it with my grandfather and uncles and dad back in the mid 80s, you know, we were running 70 cow-calf pairs and feeding hay and all year. Worked with NRCS and set up a rotational grazing paddock system with CRP exclusion down along a stream here on the southeast side. Big picture, the biggest goals that my wife and I have for the farm is we want to keep the farm viable for our kids and our future grandkids. That's how my grandfather did it for us, and we hope to do the same. Today's not about the other things we do on the farm, but we certainly try a lot of things: rotational grazing, clover overseeding. We do summer and spring annuals as well. But big picture, I came to JB and Corey in my local office back in about 2012 and said, hey, I need some shade. As you can see, the outside edge is the only place that I had trees, and we effectively had created 10-acre paddocks with no shade or windbreak. Secondarily, you know, what I found later is that we could create feed or income sources from those. I needed to minimize the loss of grazing acres during the implementation because this 72 acres is all I had. I'd already lost, you know, as you can see here, 7.1, almost 14 acres to CREP exclusion and EQIP that I wasn't able to get to. But I also wanted it to continue to do my rotational grazing. I found and read this book, Tree Crops, a Permanent Agriculture by J. Russell Smith on one of my deployments, and then reached out to some of the A team that you'll see here, Dr. Fike, JB, local NRCS, local forester, Bruce, and other farmers. I sat around our kitchen table and got out the crayons, trying to figure out what we were going to do. At that time, and JB could correct me, I don't believe Virginia specifically had implemented or had a super strong job sheet on this. And so it was more of a give and take, a lot of talking, a lot of what we were hoping to do. In this photo, my waterer is here because we hit a rock ledge. I would have rather had the water down here. And so that's why we were looking at where to implement these rows. Continued, this is a different field, but once again, you can see maybe a little bit better the way that we were going to implement 2 and 3 row tree configurations at final negotiated 100 trees per acre to attempt to limit the loss of grazing acreage to less than 20% during establishment. You'll see letters here like black walnut, BW, BL is black locust. We've got Dunstan chestnuts, honey locusts, persimmons, yellow poplar. We tried all kinds of species that we had worked with the local forester as well as NRCS's team to make sure that we had species that would be successful on our farm. I did a second implementation so I've gotten a little more high class now when I designed this, you know, using graph paper, but it's the same concept of trying to create a map so that we knew exactly what I was attempting to do, as well as the company that I contracted to install was able to install to the specs needed. Some of the quick site preps. The first time, this is a scalper. Rented it from Virginia Forestry, went down near Farmville, picked it up. It takes that top layer off and it creates a bare seed bed, but it also exposes a couple 100,000 thistle seeds as well. This is what it would look like when we installed it. So we had hardwoods meeting the practice requirements of grass competition management, as well as tree tubes. And then the yellow circles were softwoods that we installed. On this planting, they were all pitch lobs. So loblolly's trying to get half loblolly, trying to get quick growth and pitch to be able to handle some of our cooler seasons west of the Blue Ridge. This is the second silvopasture we implemented so that my installers could find where I wanted them. I used a 30-inch tiller just to knock back the sod a little bit rather than completely scalping. And you can see that it's a similar idea, just a different configuration planting of, you know, the row being hardwood, softwood, hardwood, and then the other, we call it a checkerboard. I think I've got a picture of it today later. Maintenance for this stuff, short term, keep the cattle out of the trees until they're appropriate height and protected from deer. Long term, pruning, selective harvest, but keeping that rotational grazing to ensure we don't create compaction and tree damage. This is a family. We all have our own hand saws. The boys and I utilize some pole saws as well as chainsaws for that. But you know, even my single digit age kids prune. They know not to prune more than about half the canopy. And we, you know, back when in this case we were pruning to the ground. I'll show you something called hinge cutting that we now do. I offer this as this is what we designed and we planted to, and this was a field day back in 2021. You can kind of see where this row is almost all black locusts, and they do real well on our farm. You know, an early emergent species, they grow quick. And then you've got the rows, like this is a persimmon row. There's a yellow poplar row, etc. Hopefully we'll have some better pictures, but cattle love the grass. They actually like the grass below the trees as well. Not only the nitrogen fixing of the black and honey locust, but also I think that it creates a microclimate that allows the grass to grow even or prevent the grass from burning out, especially in our hot mid-Atlantic summers. Mathematically, I think I only lost 14% of my grazing during establishment. And tree fences have actually made my rotational grazing moves easier because we've already segmented the field into different size paddocks. I know that Brett last week or the week before talked about fodder options. Black locusts have become a great fodder, especially in the summer here in the mid-Atlantic for us in a high fescue density ground cover, where my cattle, we'll put them into a field, kind of looks like this with the volunteer black locusts. And not even 2 hours later, they've grazed everything they can reach off of it. Took it a step further, utilizing some deer management techniques that I heard of, which is called hinge cutting. Hinge cutting, I try to demonstrate what it is here, but you cut about halfway through the trunk of a tree and then you bend it over. Cambium on the still connected part will keep the tree alive, but what you've done is you've created a buffet, allowing the cattle, in this case, the cattle to get to even more of those locust branches. And you can see on the left, before and then after they graze our black locusts as clean as they can, which makes the protection early quite important. The next evolution of this hinge cut, instead of cutting to form and cutting those branches all the way to the ground, we actually now hinge cut while trying to prune to form. So I don't know, it's probably a little tough to see here, but think of that as a hinge cut. So it's halfway through the branch and then it's bent down so that the cattle can still graze rather than just losing that fodder option. This picture kind of helps to show, it also creates and helps to protect those mid-size trees during an establishment. You've now got 5 or 6 6-inch diameter tree, but because the branches were brought down, the cattle can't come, kind of like what you see back here where they started and created it into a loafing area, even in the short rotation. These are pictures actually today of those same trees 2 years later. I got branches off, or we got fodder off of them last year, but you won't get 100% that make it through the next season, but you'll normally get a season or so out of them. I look forward to seeing what they've got here in another month. Two-story agriculture is part of what we were looking for and wanted to do. These are persimmon trees, a soft mast as well as honey locust pods. And I'll try and bust through these pictures because I know my time's up, but these are kind of just pictures all the way up until today, trying to show, this was a 2-row set with just yellow poplar and pitch lobs. And then this is that checkerboard that I was telling you about from the implementation, where if you notice the pines, and for whatever reason in that planting, did not do well, probably with the fescue competition or with the climate and environment during establishment. It went dry right after we planted that year. But this is what the cattle are like. They're now around the trees. We've now created and still utilize the trees as a basic temporary or semi-permanent fencing for rotation. They're out doing stockpiled fescue. They've still got 12.5 acres of fescue. So knock on wood, I might make it to mid-March. These are what those sets look like and how we utilize the faster growing softwoods to force our hardwoods hopefully into a straighter form and function. On this planting, we lost a row, and I kept this picture today because you can see you've got a nice straight tree and less branches here on the left side, but where it's able to get those suns, it's kind of starting to go that way to the right side of the screen. And so we'll come in and we'll prune, we'll give what Mother Nature wasn't able to give them. But these are some quick pictures of what it looks like during the summer, overhead, etc. kind of giving that the firs diffuse shade and rotation, as well as creating those pre-sized paddocks. You know, this is a 10-acre field with a single 4-hole water, and each of these fingers is 1/6 of the field, so something about 1.4 acres. This is the exact same set of trees, and just to show how those rows are supposed to go, this is today, this morning when I went out. And these are Dunstan chestnuts, so a Chinese chestnut, American chestnut hybrid, hopefully bringing even more deer onto the property. We talked about CREP, or CREP was mentioned earlier. I'm in a 15-year easement or CREP contract, but as you can see, I've now got probably what will be the best silvopasture on my property here in another 3 years. Still will keep those management practices of keeping the cattle out of the stream, but I look forward to being able to graze and manage that extra 11 acres for the farm. Like I said, when we started, we do our best to keep the entire family involved on the farm, enjoying the farm as the great blessing it is. And we try always to remember what our primary goal is. And so we look forward, if you're ever in Virginia, if you ever want to come by or just chat, feel free to give us a call. That's all I've got.
Great. Thanks. Great presentation, Buck. And thanks. Great presentations, Joe and JB. A lot of cool stuff going on. And I like all the pictures. I like how you're getting your kids to work. I think I need a silvopasture field to get my kids out working a little harder. It is the top of the hour, but our presenter said they're willing to stay for a little bit longer to answer some questions. So I'm happy to release anyone who wants to go, but I will ask a few questions as people are allowed. So we did have a question, and this is kind of a good question. There was someone who commented that they're having some challenges when they go to the county ag offices of NRCS. And they said that they see smiling faces who speak in bureaucratic Greek, but don't break things down well, nor assist in planning anything. And so this person feels like they're missing opportunities, and asked if this is a situation where a technical service provider could better assist them with interpretation and guidance, or what's the best way to go about it if they're not feeling like they're getting the right help or understanding what help is available. And anyone can answer.
Leslie, I'll address that. This is JB. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess some field offices are better equipped to help you with this particular practice, and some are not. So if they're not able to really help you, then ask to get some assistance from their area office level, which should have a slightly higher level of technical assistance. And if they can't from the area office, there should be someone at their state office level that'll be able to help you and provide you the technical assistance that you need. In certain states, they do not offer silvopasture, period, within NRCS. So it is state specific where they've adopted this practice and where they let you establish it through NRCS.
Great. I think that kind of answers the question. So I think it's it's a challenge from office to office. They're going to provide different services, and some are just better equipped to help. But yeah, I think there is recourse if you're not getting the help you need as well. There was a question too. What does CREP stand for? CREP, Buck?
I'm looking it up now. I think it's Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program.
That's correct.
I believe it's
yes.
correct. No, I'm not looking for a job.
There you go. Yeah, it's always tough not to speak in acronyms. There's a question here. I think this is directed towards Buck. After you perform a hinge cut on a black locust and the cattle feed on the foliage, how long does the black locust live? And what do you do with the black locust deadwood from that point? Or does it coppice?
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. So ultimately, the black locust tree survives, until such time as a full-blown harvest. When I hinge cut, like the picture that I showed of the hinge cut level with the ground, kind of making into that trough, that tree survived for 3 years. And that was part of my management plan of thinning that set of trees to ensure that I still get enough light to the ground without so that I'm utilizing those trees all the way and through harvest because they aren't quite large enough for firewood or other harvest techniques. And the pieces that are on the ground, honestly, I leave the majority of them on the ground and just let nature take care of recycling them back in. So between the cattle and the just normal rotting process, they've done well. As I'm getting larger and larger limbs, I am looking for, and I've got the most odd group of equipment on my farm, but I'm looking for a mulcher so that we can run this around the farm and create our own mulch just for utilization on the farm until such time that I have too much mulch, and then I'll find somebody else who needs mulch.
There you go. The next market. There's a question. It was answered in the Q&A, but I'm just going to ask it out loud here. So it seems like silvopasture necessarily involves several NRCS practices, so tree and shrub establishment, prescribed grazing, etc. And it said, what is the silvopasture practice itself, which is number 381, address that is not addressed by those supplemental practices? And just to remind everybody, in NRCS, they kind of categorize everything by practices. So just to bring you back to that.
Yeah, I'm gonna take that one because JB is gonna say the same thing probably. It's a really good question, and it's something we are looking at as well. We are currently updating the silvopasture conservation practice standard, and JB is actually on that team. And that particular issue is something we're looking at. So I guess just kind of leave it at that, but I think we will be addressing that concern. And as JB pointed out, in states where silvopasture has not been adopted by that state, it is feasible to use those practices just as they describe to install silvopasture.
Right. Yeah, so you have to imagine too that this is a giant federal agency, and all these practices were established, and so they have to review them regularly.
Yeah.
As some still matter, some don't, or some can be combined, but constant evolution. There's a question here about, is there anyone doing silvopasture on contour or keyline so that each contour row of trees, maybe that's supposed to be tree line, so each contour row of trees gets free gravity irrigation and to help convert flooding liabilities into better filtration of groundwater? Essentially, are there contours where people are doing silvopasture practices? This is open for anyone, I think.
I saw the question and I don't have a good answer for it. I think someone commented in there about Mark Shepard up in Wisconsin who is doing that. Thinking that from the NRCS perspective, when you start talking about contouring and things like that, that almost gets into engineering practices because we're talking about moving water around. And it's taking things a little bit further than what I'm comfortable discussing right here on a live webinar today. I'll just leave it at that. And
Leslie, I'll add one thing. Working through the design and layout of a particular site, if the slopes are steep, it is very reasonable to lay it out pretty much on the contour. It may not be exact, but you can do it pretty close. Just have to work in the functionality and the size and the shape of the lanes or the paddocks and relative to those tree rows. But so a lot goes into it. A lot of it's very flexible, but yes, it can be done.
That makes sense. And Buck, did you have something to say, or just?
I'm just reading. I'm ready for the next question if the
Fair
beehives
enough.
come up.
Okay. There's a question about So for Buck, about how after he's planted his trees, how many years did you have to protect them before you could let your livestock graze under them?
So it all depends. In our first planting, we tried to plant a lot of black walnut, which doesn't grow as quickly. My black walnuts now are 10 years old, and I am just now able to allow cattle in my highly intensive rotational grazing. And I put that big asterisk because if you leave cattle around a set of trees, they are going to take care of the trees for you. But as long as you continue to rotate and minimize that impact and give the tree a chance to respond, black locust trees, we can we have actually continued to implement on the farm. We now get black locust trees from the local forestry office in Augusta County, which is only 30 minutes from us. And we as a family are able to plant about 500 trees in one day. And we are able to allow the cattle back on those trees in about 5 years. And that's ensuring, because they will eat the fodder, we have to get it above the browse line. They'll do the first part of the trimming for us. I want the height at 8 feet so that if I'm chasing a calf, I don't get clotheslined. So that's the next piece.
Practical reasons, multiple practical reasons.
Right.
There's also a question that, have you seen any additional weight or frame changes in your herd since implementing Silvopasture?
I am in the process of gathering data on I buy weaning steers from a friend of mine over in Luray, and we have been trying to do weight gains on those steers. Without data in hand, I will tell you there's no question that they are much better suited to handle our mid-Atlantic summers. And I have not seen that plateau where there is no gains or even some losses that I was seeing early on in my grass-fed beef operation.
Interesting. And then I think this is probably our last question here, but have you been able to increase your cattle stocking? Which is, again, it depends.
It always depends. If we do it on an acreage basis, yes. I lost 40 acres of rented property, and I did not have to downsize the herd. I've always been understocked because of it's a part-time job and things like that, and trying to work my way up. But this now that we have that full use of that 14% that we excluded, which when I say excluded, I'm sorry, I know I'm going to go off a side. We exclude the large animals. When I was doing cow calf, the calves, it was a creep feeder. The calves would go under and would not bother the trees, but were able to creep feed that. So I do believe that ultimately, once you get the establishment, once you get and are using that fodder, you absolutely could increase your stocking rate as long as you're managing for the climate and the your property, your animals that day, that year.
Right. Well, we got one last question, then I'll wrap it up here. But how did you control weeds in the tree rows early after establishment?
Either with a walk behind bush hog or a walk behind sickle bar mower, or we had a lot of trouble with the scalped areas and thistle populations that came through. I might disagree with some of my academia friends. I believe the thistles were a perfect protector of the trees because the trees grow, and at the time that the thistles are now taking over, the trees have almost stopped growing, and now the deer can't find the trees because of the thistles. So I'm not positive that JB would agree with me, but I will tell you it functioned, and it also created a little bit of that initial competition for straight up growth. But best thing is manual practices. We are a mostly organic best practice farm. We are not organic, but we utilize a lot of manual efforts versus herbicides.
And is thistle invasive in Virginia, or this particular thistle, or is it just that it emerges because of the disturbance of the soil.
I think it was the disturbance of the soil. It had no competition whatsoever. I mean, we took off all the organic matter, put it into rows off the side, and now you've got a nice clay soil that nothing else is going to fight in there. And the thistle's like, hey, nobody, God will give us something to cover the soil no matter what. It just happens it's thistles.
Yeah.
So
Nature abhors a vacuum, I think.
And Buck actually taught his cattle to eat thistle, right, Buck?
I did.
There you go.
If you go to the links that JB gave in his presentation, one, you'll see some great Silvopasture videos. One of which, if you thought that I was funny, I'm in that video as well with my got grass shirt. But the Virginia Council of or the Virginia Council of Forage and Grassland Council has winter meetings, and one of them was graze, teaching your animals to graze weeds, and you can do it.
Excellent. Well, I've only worked on teaching my dog, but that's next level. Okay, well, it is about 2:15. We've gone a little bit over, and I just want to thank our presenters so much. JB and Joe Alley are both with the NRCS, but Buck is a volunteer, so he volunteered to come here in addition to his day job. But we appreciate all of our speakers sharing all the information. You can find all the links to the presentations. They're at the link where you joined this webinar. And like I said, we'll be sharing a full resource with assemblage with all the different resources and videos, etc., listed in the next week or so. So thanks so much. It's been a great presentation.
Thanks for having me.